to profit from a downturn in the markets. Again, this is not gambling. One thing I would never recommend to people is gamble.
Yeah. Just generally buying stocks is random gambling. It's like picking colors on a craps table. I want to thank you for joining us, Alessio Rastani. The website is leadingtrader.com. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it. Good show.
Thank you, sir. Amazing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break here, and then we're going to come back with the one, the only Max Keiser in an extended interview. This is InfoWars Nightly News. Stay with us.
The American dream. There's a reason they call it a dream.
Who's there?
Cock-a-doodle-doo, pal.
No! I don't have any more money! My job sucks right now, please! I'll have more money next month! You can't take my house!
Is that your signature?
It is a private bank owned by private stockholders.
A private bank?
Do not let the name Federal fool you.
If I got this money from the bank, and the bank got it from the Federal Reserve dump trucks, where does the Federal Reserve get their money?
They take our property away, just like Thomas Jefferson said they would.
Those sons of bitches!
It's the greatest theft in human history.
And we are back. It's InfoWars Nightly News on this October 11th, 2011 edition. And I wanted to end this transmission off with the one, the only Max Keiser. Now, we've talked about a lot of issues with Max in the past, the gulag economy, the fact that banks were going to start charging you to keep money, and in this cashless society that they would basically force people onto a digital plantation where you're actually charged for the right to engage in commerce, kind of a global private tax to the bankers. It's all happening. The Euro dictatorship trying to swallow what's left of their sovereignty. It's self-run by private banks, admitting it's undemocratic. John Major coming out, who was the architect of the major treaty getting England into the Euro, saying it's a terrible thing. We're going to talk about Occupy Wall Street, all these new bank fees. It is all coming up. Democrats throwing Obama under the bus. And Max is also doing big things over in Europe with the first of its kind economic conference. It's all coming up in this in-depth interview with Max Keiser. Max, great to have you here with us.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Alex Jones.
A few weeks ago, a trader came out, a stock trader, on BBC, and it made huge news. And he was an independent trader, and he said that Goldman Sachs rules the world, and there's a global occupation of bankers. It basically sounded like a replay of Max Keiser or Alex Jones, and everybody freaked out, and dozens of publications, Washington Post, I mean, you name it, BBC, you had to come out and say, yes, this is really a real person, this was a real interview. I mean, now stating the obvious, they have to ask, is the guy a real trader? Why did that get everybody so freaked out? But then when you talk about it on big international television or even on BBC with your own show, it doesn't get as much attention.
Well, the big interesting part of the Rastani interview that you're referring to, what made it really interesting and newsworthy was the reaction of the BBC presenters who have been cuckolded by the banking industry and lied to for years and years that they are doing the right thing and the good thing. And so they were like a spouse who suddenly finds out that their wife or husband is cheating on them. These BBC presenters were told in public that the banks are actually trying to screw them and that they're all crooked. And so they had this reaction, this overreaction, this melodramatic reaction on TV.
Oh, ridiculous. Who could say that? Oh, who ever heard of that? He says fish swim in the sea. Ooh.
So that's what made it a classic TV moment. And I think that's just part of the overall global insurrection against banking occupation, as I call it. It's peeking its way into the mainstream media. It's poking through the wall, and it's
seeping into the matrix.
Yep, the shafts of light of what's really going on are now beaming into the very controlled media situation. So this is a part of that, and it's growing. I'm just reading a tweet right now from Lucy Kavanaugh, who's with Russia Today, and she is saying that there's a crowd outside of Jamie Dimon's house on the Upper East Side of New York City chanting USA, USA. So as you know, Alex, we've been talking about the fact that the real people behind the banking terrorist network are principally Lloyd Blankfein and Jamie Dimon. We've been telling people that they need to focus their attention on these two characters. Now, Jamie Dimon is suddenly being called out for the financial terrorist that he is. The facade has been torn away, and people now understand that if you really are for USA, USA, that you would want this terrorist at Guantanamo Bay or waterboarded or something like that, because he is destroying your economy more than anyone else in the world today. So finally, people understand who the villain is in this story. And this is growing, and your show has, of course, been a big part of that. And I think your call to go after the Fed is also very important, because Jamie Dimon is on the board of directors of the New York Fed, as well as being the CEO of J.P. Morgan. And the Fed is really the sub-level, which is the level that needs to be attacked. And I know you were down in Texas, and I saw the video down there in Texas, and it makes perfect sense. And I hope people like Naomi Klein, who is now resurfacing again. She was a big name during the anti-globalization movement of the late 90s. And she's kind of taking ownership of the Occupy Wall Street demonstrations and protests. I hope that she understands and begins to talk about the Federal Reserve Bank and what they do and their role in this occupation in our own country by these foreign-owned terrorists, the bankers.
Well, Max, let me raise that to you specifically, because 2-3 weeks ago, I reached out to Occupy Wall Street. I sent reporters all over the country. They really were grassroots. Now in San Antonio, in Dallas, in New York, in D.C., the people that have gotten control of it are Democratic Party operatives in many cases. And they say no Ron Paul signs, no protest the Fed is federal. And then they say to us, how dare you not go after Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, Wells Fargo. And I'm like, those are the big mega banks that own the shares of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is how they get their government power. It's how they get their trillions in bailouts. So I'm saying take out their power, take out their fortress, then we can get the little buggers inside. And just like the mainline Tea Party got co-opted by Republicans, now they don't want to go after the Fed. When it all started with Ron Paul 4 years ago, now they want to be led by Herman Cain, the former head of the Fed in Kansas City. And it's the same thing with the Democrats now, and the Fed coming out and endorsing Occupy Wall Street in a hope of blaming Main Street and the tens of thousands of legitimate companies on Wall Street. Instead, now it's this class warfare thing, exactly what mainline Democrats want. And it makes me very, very sad, because I wanted to embrace Occupy Wall Street, and I know it's a diverse group, but the people that the mainstream media gives attention are people like Michael Moore, saying, let's get rid of capitalism. That's the problem. No, the problem is monopoly capitalists that you talk so much about, these monopoly men. So what's your message to them? Am I right in what I'm saying, or am I wrong? Should I embrace Karl Marx right now on air?
Well, as you can imagine, I'm in pretty close contact with the organizers of Occupy Wall Street, principally David DeGraw, who's one of the 2 or 3 top people who brought the whole thing to life. And he and I have been talking about this lack of a specific demands for the groups. And my issue, the risk that I put forward, is that as the movement gets bigger and bigger and bigger without a specific goal, it's ripe to be co-opted. And I saw evidence of this just a few days ago when Unilever, which owns Ben & Jerry's ice cream, came out in favor of Occupy Wall Street. So that's a very bad development when a foreign corporation, in this case a Dutch company, Unilever, and they have their fake, organically driven Ben & Jerry's ice cream front, come out and start to co-opt this movement for corporate sales purposes. You know you're on a slippery slope down to irrelevance. And this is the problem is not having a specific goal. If Occupy Wall Street said our specific goal is to demand that Jamie Dimon steps down as CEO of J.P. Morgan and from the New York Federal Reserve Bank chair position.
Or demand a return of Glass-Steagall, or that the trillions of stolen bailout be clawed back, or...
Right, but I mean, those demands require a bit more process and time, whereas a regime change, like Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, I mean, once he got the message, he had to step down. So Jamie Dimon...
Yeah, so we put out a simpler demand to show the power of the movement that makes sense. Hey, step down Jamie Dimon, and by the way, we want criminal investigations.
Right. Now, people will say, well, you know, if you take one Jamie Dimon away, 10 more like him will take his place. That's true. But you did demonstrate that the power of the group to affect the regime change, and if they put up somebody else who's like Jamie Dimon, he's a financial terrorist, then he's going to have to step down too. So the regime change is a very specific goal. If you do this, then Unilever and Ben & Jerry's would not want to attach themselves to your movement because suddenly it's got a specific goal and they themselves rely on Jamie Dimon for financing and JP Morgan for financing. So by law, their fiduciary responsibility would preclude them from being anywhere near the Occupy Wall Street demands. So this is why having a specific goal is paramount to galvanizing an action that will allow this movement to have some success. Otherwise, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until it's co-opted by corporate America, and you'll start to see commercials on TV with Ben and Jerry down at Occupy Wall Street eating some new flavor of ice cream like, you know, Occupy cream pie or something like that. Yeah, and it'll become just another part of that American fudge that just kind of permeates everything that we do, where everything's great, don't worry, Disney is here to rescue you, and it just goes down the drain.
Well, sure. Now, Max, I want to shift into some other areas. It's just for me, I tried to reach out to these groups, and the so-called leaders of it, they claim there's no leaders, but you know, there really are Democratic Party operatives, move on, they're all involved. And it's just the left wing of the same military-industrial banking complex. I mean, look at Obama, the wars, the torture, the extrajudicial killings, and now quoting Bush statements by his evil lawyers, you know, as the excuse for him to act as an imperial legate. That's my next question. What do you make? Because, I mean, I predicted the Obama deception and in fall the republic that you're in 2.5 years ago that Obama would be politically destroyed because they build him up, then he takes the blame for the agenda, a new puppet comes in. And we know that when things get into these crisis modes, the establishment, the oligarchs, the financial ruling class that are anti-free market, they like to put in puppets, build them up, and then destroy them so they take the blame and not the corrupt plutocrats or the autocratic banksters, whatever you want to call them. And now we see Chicago Tribune, Washington Post, hundreds of major publications on the so-called left calling for him to step down in the next election and all of this. What does that signify to you that's happening with Obama? What does that signify for this whole agenda? Because then waiting in the wings is a collection of other manufactured plastic Ken dolls, Herman Cain, Mitt Romney, Rick Perry.
Well, unfortunately, it ruins the whole idea of one person, one vote, and it hides the fact that it's $1, one vote. You know, you have this plutocracy in the United States now, this aristocracy, a return to monarchy and kleptocracy. And they want people to think that the presidency is like just Dancing with the Stars or some other kind of contest show, talent show, that we want whoever's going to be up there that has the most quote-unquote talent. And so this makes the American population similar, as I see it, to what we saw happen in ancient Rome. The politicians